Something happened on February 28, 2026, that stopped the entire world cold. In the early hours of a Saturday morning, explosions tore across Tehran. Smoke rose over the Persian capital, and within hours the world learned that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, was dead. Killed in a joint operation by Israel and the United States, codenamed Operation Roaring Lion and Operation Epic Fury. Within hours, missiles were flying back. Gulf states were hit. Sirens screamed over Tel Aviv. The Strait of Hormuz trembled. And the whole world held its breath, asking one question. Is this how it starts? But here's what most news anchors aren't telling you. What military analysts aren't saying. What the headlines are completely missing. This attack, this specific, historic, world-altering moment, happened in the days directly leading up to the Jewish festival of Purim. The exact same festival that commemorates the miraculous defeat of an ancient Persian official who tried to exterminate every Jew living in the Persian Empire. The same Persian Empire, the same land that is modern-day Iran. Some things are too precise to be called coincidence, because the Bible didn't just predict that Iran would become a threat to Israel in the last days. It also foretold the moment when that threat would be broken. And it placed clues throughout Scripture, clues in Jeremiah, in Daniel, in Ezekiel, in Esther, that point to exactly this season we are living in right now. Today, you are going to see something that very few people are putting together. The biblical timing hidden inside the headlines, the ancient prophecies behind the missiles, and the staggering question that every believer should be asking right now. Stay with me until the very end, because what you are about to discover will permanently change the way you read today's news. The day the world changed. Let's start with what actually happened, because the details matter. On the morning of February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched one of the most complex coordinated military operations in modern history. Hundreds of missiles and warheads struck military facilities, command structures, nuclear infrastructure, and leadership compounds across Iran. The operation was designed not just to degrade Iran's military capability. It was designed to end the Islamic Republic as it exists today. President Donald Trump said it plainly in a video message broadcast across social media that morning. The goal was regime change. He spoke directly to the Iranian people, telling them, "Take back your country. This is your moment." Within hours, Iran confirmed what Israel had already claimed. Ayatollah Khamenei, the man who had led the Islamic Republic for over 3 decades, who had chanted death to Israel and death to America from mosque pulpits across the world, was dead. 40 Iranian military commanders were reportedly killed in the initial strikes. Ballistic missile sites were destroyed. Nuclear facilities that had already been struck in June 2025 were hit again. Iran retaliated immediately. Missiles and drones flew toward Israel. Gulf states, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, were struck by Iranian retaliatory fire. The famous Burj Al Arab in Dubai caught fire. Flights across the entire Middle East were halted. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. The region that had been simmering for decades had, in a single Saturday morning, burst into a full-scale regional war. And yet, for those who read their Bibles, none of this came as a surprise. The timing that shocked the world. Here is where something extraordinary becomes impossible to ignore. The attack happened on February 28th, and on March 2nd, just 4 days later, the Jewish world began celebrating Purim. Purim, the festival that commemorates one of the most remarkable stories in all of Scripture. The Book of Esther. The miraculous reversal of a death decree against the Jewish people living inside the Persian Empire. The geographical connection alone is staggering. The story of Esther does not take place in Egypt. It doesn't unfold in Babylon. It happens in Susa, the royal capital of the Persian Empire, a city located in what is now southwestern Iran. The empire that threatened to annihilate God's people in the Book of Esther is the same territory that calls itself the Islamic Republic of Iran today. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it himself in his very first statement after the strikes began. He stood before the cameras and declared, 2,500 years ago, in ancient Persia, a tyrant rose against us with the very same goal, to utterly destroy our people. Today as well, on Purim, the lot has fallen, and in the end, this evil regime will fall too. He wasn't speaking politically, he was speaking prophetically, drawing a direct line between a 2,500-year-old story and a 2026 military operation. But that's only the beginning of the timing. Because in the days immediately before Purim, Jewish communities around the world read a specific passage from Deuteronomy, known as Parshat Zachor. This reading commands the Israelites to remember the attack of the ancient nation of Amalek, the first unprovoked assault on Israel after they left Egypt. And Jewish tradition identifies Haman, the villain of the Esther story, as a descendant of Amalek. The very same Haman who lived in the Persian Empire, the very same land that is Iran today. And then there was one more sign in the sky. On March 3rd, the exact day of Purim, a lunar eclipse produced a blood moon visible across large portions of America, Asia, and Australia. The prophet Joel wrote, "The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord." A blood moon, on Purim. The same week Israel and the United States struck Iran. You cannot construct that kind of convergence in a laboratory. You cannot engineer that kind of timing with human planning alone. Jeremiah's forgotten prophecy. Now here is where we need to open the Bible, because ancient prophecy is far more precise about Iran's current moment than most people realize. In the book of Jeremiah chapter 49, there is a prophecy that very few teachers stop to study. It is short, it is overlooked, and it is breathtaking in its specificity. God speaks through Jeremiah and says, "I will shatter the bow of Elam, the backbone of its strength." Now pay close attention to what Elam refers to. Elam was one of the ancient civilizations that formed the Persian Empire. Its territory? Southwestern Iran, the exact same region where Iran's most critical nuclear facilities have been located. Natanz, Isfahan, Fordo, all within the ancient land of Elam. The prophecy speaks of the bow of Elam being shattered. In ancient warfare, the bow was the most strategic long-range weapon a nation possessed. The ballistic missile is the modern equivalent of that bow. Iran's ballistic missile program, which could threaten Israel, the Gulf states, Europe, and beyond, was the primary target of Operation Epic Fury. The United States announced that its military objectives included destroying Iran's missile infrastructure entirely, leveling its missile industry to the ground, eliminating the very capability that made Iran a global threat for decades. The bow of Elam, the backbone of its strength, shattered. But then Jeremiah adds something that changes everything. Because after describing the judgment, he writes, "Yet in the last days I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares the Lord." Read that again. Judgment first, and then, in the last days, restoration. This is not a prophecy of total destruction. This is a prophecy with two movements: shattering followed by healing, breaking followed by rebuilding, judgment followed by grace. And that phrase, last days, is not accidental. Jeremiah is specifically anchoring this prophecy in the end-time calendar. This is not something that was fulfilled 2,000 years ago during some forgotten Persian conflict. This is a prophecy for the season of history that is unfolding right now. Daniel saw this coming. There is another prophet who describes something remarkably similar, and he did it with a precision that leaves scholars speechless. His name was Daniel, and he described a vision in chapter 8 that has fascinated interpreters for centuries, but takes on new meaning when you hold it next to today's headlines. Daniel saw a ram standing beside a river. It had two horns, charged westward, northward, and southward. Nothing could stand against it. It was unstoppable. And the angel Gabriel explained exactly what it represented: the kings of Media and Persia. The ram is Iran. For decades, the Islamic Republic had positioned itself as exactly that, an unstoppable regional force, charging outward in every direction, supporting proxies in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, defying Western pressure, building a nuclear program in secret, chanting death to Israel as state policy. The ram was charging, and for a long time, nothing could stop it. But Daniel's vision didn't end there. He then saw a goat appear from the west with blinding speed, barely touching the ground as it ran. When it reached the ram, It struck with such overwhelming force that the ram's horns were shattered. The ram was thrown to the ground and trampled. Bible scholars have historically identified this goat as the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, a Western power that destroyed Persia with supernatural military speed. That historical fulfillment was real and literal. But there is a prophetic pattern in Scripture. What happens once in history often echoes again in the last days. And the pattern of a Western force shattering the ram of Persia, coming swiftly, unexpectedly, with overwhelming power, has replayed itself in the opening days of March 2026. Some prophecy teachers are now pointing to Daniel 8 and asking the question that demands serious consideration. Are we watching this ancient vision echo in real time? Gog and Magog is not yet. But here is where we need to be very careful, because there is a danger in reading every military development as the ultimate fulfillment of prophecy. Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 describe the war of Gog and Magog, the great end-time coalition that will rise against Israel in the latter days. And Persia is explicitly named among its members. But here is what many people miss about that prophecy. Ezekiel 38 is very specific about the conditions when Gog and Magog arrives. Before the coalition can invade, Israel must be dwelling securely, without walls, bars, or gates, at rest, at peace with their neighbors in a way they have not experienced since 1948. That does not describe Israel today. A nation under active missile attack, with sirens screaming over Tel Aviv, is not a nation dwelling safely without walls. This means something remarkable. The events of this week are not the Gog and Magog war. They may be the prerequisite for it, the clearing of the stage before that final drama begins. Some prophecy scholars are making this exact argument. Iran in its current form, aggressive, terror-sponsoring, nuclear-pursuing, is actually out of sequence with where Scripture places Persia in the final war. Because for Israel to dwell in safety before Gog arrives, the threat Iran poses must first be removed. The collapse of the Islamic Republic may not be the fulfillment of Gog and Magog. It may be the preparation for Israel's prophesied season of peace that must come first. The Esther parallel. Let's go deeper into the book of Esther, because the parallels between that ancient story and this present moment are too precise to rush past. The story unfolds in Susa, the royal capital of the Persian Empire, modern-day southwestern Iran. At the heart of that empire, a man named Haman had risen to the second highest position in the kingdom. He despised the Jewish people with an ancient hatred. He convinced the king to sign a decree that would exterminate every Jew in the empire on a specific date, a date chosen by casting lots. That is where the name Purim comes from, the lot. But God had already placed a Jewish woman at the center of the palace. Her name was Esther, and her cousin Mordecai sent her a message that has echoed through centuries of history. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? For such a time as this. Esther risked her life, approached the king unsummoned, revealed the plot. Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai, and the day marked for the annihilation of God's people became a day of triumph. Now consider this. While the Islamic Republic spent its resources funding proxy armies and building centrifuges, the fastest-growing church in the entire world over the last 20 years has been the underground church in Iran. Millions of Iranians turning to Jesus in secret, risking prison, flogging, and execution to follow Christ. These Iranians are not the regime. They are the silent people of Persia, and they may be standing on the edge of the most dramatic national transformation in the modern world. Jeremiah said it. In the last days, God will restore the fortunes of Elam. The lion rises. Notice something the world barely paused to consider. Israel named its operation Operation Roaring Lion. In Scripture, the lion is the symbol of the tribe of Judah. Genesis 49 calls Judah a lion's cub. Revelation describes Jesus as the lion of the tribe of Judah. The lion is royal, it is fierce, it is victorious. And before the first strike was launched, Prime Minister Netanyahu stood at the Western Wall and placed a handwritten note between its ancient stones. That note, released to the public a week later, contained one sentence from the Book of Numbers. The people shall rise up as a lion. Numbers 23:24. A verse spoken by Balaam, a pagan prophet hired to curse Israel who ended up blessing them instead. An enemy commissioned to destroy God's people, overruled by heaven. The Prime Minister of Israel was quoting that story. On the eve of the most dramatic military operation in Israeli history, and he placed it in the most prophetically charged location on earth. Roaring lion, the note in the wall, Purim, the blood moon, all of it. 1 week. What happens next? So where do we go from here? First, we are watching the dismantling of the Ezekiel 38 coalition before it can fully form. Persia must be weakened. Israel must enter a season of peace, and only then can Gog descend from the north against an Israel that has let down its guard. What is happening right now is not the end. It may be the beginning of the end of a chapter, the chapter that leads to that prophesied peace, before the next and darker one arrives. Second, Jeremiah's two-part prophecy reminds us that judgment is never God's final word over a people. He judges, he breaks, and then, in the last days, he restores. The Iranian people are not the enemy. Millions who have prayed in secret, wept for freedom, and followed Christ underground may be standing on the edge of something the news cameras cannot capture. A revival in the land of ancient Persia would not surprise the Bible. It would fulfill it. Third, the pattern of Purim reminds us that God works in ways no human strategy could engineer. No one planned for Esther to be in that palace. No one designed her courage to arrive at the exact right moment. It was providence. And providence has a way of making impossible reversals look inevitable in hindsight. The timing of this operation, days before Purim, in the land of ancient Persia, beneath a blood moon, carries the fingerprint of that same providence. A warning and a promise. Before we close, we need to sit with both sides of what Scripture reveals. The Bible is not only a book of promises, it is also a book of warnings. Ezekiel is clear. The nations that rise against Israel in the last days will face divine judgment. The God of Scripture does not ignore what is done to Jerusalem and to his people. But the Bible also warns against triumphalism, against celebrating the suffering of any people, even those whose government was hostile. Hundreds of Iranian civilians have died in these strikes. The people of Persia are not disposable. They are beloved by the same God who raised Cyrus to free Israel, who placed Esther in a Persian palace, who is planting underground churches in Tehran right now. The Bible holds both: judgment on the regime, restoration for the people. And the blood moon on Purim reminds us that we are standing at a hinge point in history. Joel wrote that the moon would turn to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord, not to terrify us, but to prepare us, to shake us awake from the comfortable numbness of ordinary life and remind us that history has a direction, a destination, and a king who is steering it toward a conclusion he already wrote. Closing. From the days of Genesis, when the descendants of Elam first appeared in the Table of Nations, to the courts of Ahasuerus, where Esther saved a generation, to the visions of Daniel, who saw the rise and fall of Persia written in heaven before it ever happened on earth. Scripture has always known that Iran would play a central role in the final act of human history. And right now, in the first week of March 2026, we may be watching that final act begin. The bow of Elam is shattered. The regime that menaced Israel for 47 years is collapsing. And somewhere in the ruins of what was, the seeds of what Jeremiah promised are already being planted. Restoration. In the last days. The question is not whether prophecy is being fulfilled. The question is what you will do with the fact that you are alive in the middle of it. Are you watching as a spectator? Or as someone who understands that every prophetic fulfillment is also a personal invitation, to draw near to the God who has been writing this story since before the flood, and who has not lost control of a single page? The ancient prophecies are not myths. They are not metaphors. They are a map. And right now, the landmarks are appearing exactly where the map said they would be. So tell me, do you believe we are watching prophecy unfold in real time? Have the events of this week changed the way you read Scripture? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this connected dots you've never seen connected before, hit the like button. It helps more people find this. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because the prophecies are moving faster than the headlines. See you in the next video. Blessings.